As a cursed Yareli main that has been accused of this title since the dawn of time, locked away in a prison of being sent a Yareli every time I load up a livestream, I felt it was only appropriate with my 129 Yarelis that I make a video for her Prime release. My goal after this video is to make you a Yareli main. Let's see if I can succeed in doing so. All memes aside though, Yareli is one of the most underrated Warframes in the game and is incredibly versatile and is also very, very tanky if you learn how to use Merulina correctly. Bubble frame. I like bubbles, they make me happy. The way to farm her is through the Wave Rider quest. You can actually farm her really early on in the game, and especially after the many changes this frame has received over the years, she's actually a very good early game frame if you can stomach finishing the quest and farming for the parts. Otherwise, to farm her prime, it's the usual relic packs through Teshin, open world syndicates, Hepit on Void for Lith relics, Ukko for Miso and Neo relics, Kappa or Apollo for Neo and Axie relics. Yareli's passive is called Critical Flow. If you move for 1.5 seconds, which has to be by simply moving by using Sprint and WASD, you will gain 200% critical chance for her secondary weapons. This buff will be removed if you stop for 1 second. This crit buff is additive, and while you are constantly moving, it will stay up for the most part. If you are planning on using Yareli for secondaries only, then this is really nice and works, but I may be going against the grain here. While Yareli may be designed for secondaries, I actually enjoy using her for whatever weapon I see fit. Because of Snares, her first ability, I have and always will praise this ability to be one of the best in the game. Why? Because Snares applies damage vulnerability to enemies and lifts them up, stunning them. But that damage vulnerability scales incredibly well with ability strength. We all know how good damage vulnerability as a mechanic is, as it literally multiplies the damage a target receives by stacking multiplicatively with other damage bonuses and buffs. Cast out 5 bubbles at a time, capping at 15 in total. If there are no enemies in front of you when you cast it and an enemy walks by the bubble will hone in on the enemy and pick them up, applying cold damage per second. However, there's no cold procs, but it will deal cold damage per second. The interesting thing about Snares is they will still target enemies affected by Overguard. The only thing is it won't crowd control them by picking it up because they're affected by Overguard. The casting animation of this ability is already pretty quick, but scaling it with casting speed allows this ability to be a good option for shield gating if you opt for that route in building her for survivability. Not that she really needs it. If you cast Snares while on top of Merulina, you will actually cast it faster. Snares alone is a hard carry for Yareli's kit and pretty much provides a global buff for all weapon types you use. This leads me onto her second ability, Merulina, her best and worst ability in her kit, and this section is going to be a little bit long, so buckle up and get your popcorn. When casted, you will summon Merulina, which is your boat friend that acts like a K-drive essentially. That's how the movement mechanics work. Merulina will provide you with a 90% damage reduction and will allow you to be immune to stagger while riding. You will also be forced to use only your secondary when you are on top of Merulina. This is not for everyone, and I understand it's not for me either. I don't enjoy it at all, but if you enjoy it and would like to make use of Merulina and use only your secondaries, by all means go for it. As long as you are having fun with Yareli, that's all that matters. There are a lot of bugs with the K-drive mechanic, which I don't know if they've been fixed already, but even then, there are still a lot of actions and stuff that force you to dismount, and it just feels clunky in certain tile sets. It gets a bit frustrating. But if you practice with it, you get good with Merulina and the K-drive and the tighter and the smaller tile sets, then actually it's not so bad. I've just never really been one to try and enjoy it personally. And on top of this, you cannot cast subsumed abilities while on Merulina. You will have to hop off cast and then get back on, which is not the end of the world. It's just tedious, I guess. That's the worst part of this ability, the K-drive and the forcing of your secondary weapon. But the best part is as follows. When you cast this ability, you will gain 4 seconds of invulnerability. During this period, any damage taken will then be added to Merulina's total health. When you dismount manually by casting the ability or because Merulina died, you will gain 1.5 seconds of invulnerability, allowing you to quickly recast it. This means that Yareli is one of the few frames in the game that has the ability to be somewhat invulnerable permanently, as long as you practice and get good with timing your Merulina casts. This is incredibly important, especially when you are moving into much higher levels of content. It is important to understand that Merulina protects Yareli by redirecting 90% of the incoming damage to Merulina's health, and Merulina is not affected by adaptation and total eclipse, but adaptation stacks can be accumulated while riding Merulina. Merulina has an augment called Merulina's Guardian. Enemies that are affected by sea snares and are eliminated will heal Merulina for 20% of their health. Upon healing, you gain 200% reload and 200% fire rate on secondary weapons for 20 seconds. This buff is affected by ability duration, and you can trigger Archon Intensify, and you can use Combat Discipline to trigger the bonus more consistently. It is important to note that it will only proc if Merulina is not at full health, so that's why Combat Discipline is good, as it will drop the health ever so slightly each time. However, realistically, in most missions, you're going to be damaged anyway, so the Combat Discipline is an option, but it's not mandatory. Admittedly, if you can stomach the K-Drive mechanics of Merulina, this augment is absolutely disgusting with certain synergies, considering you are getting 200% crit from your passive, damage vulnerability from your first, and reload speed plus fire rate. Like, it's pretty much covering all the bases to buff you in any way. So yeah, if you were to use this, I'd recommend running Combat Discipline if you feel like it's not as consistent. But the most important thing is make sure that you have a good ammo mutation mod on your secondary, because you will literally delete your ammo pool with this augment. Then we move on to what many people would consider to be Yareli's saving grace, Loyal Guardian. This is going to get a little interesting, so listen closely. With this augment, you no longer ride Merulina. Instead, Merulina will follow you and cast sea snares to nearby enemies with a 2-second cooldown at base. This cooldown is affected by ability efficiency inversely, so increasing your efficiency will reduce the cooldown to a minimum of 0.5 seconds at 175% efficiency. The sea snares casted from Merulina are cast one at a time, rather than in groups of 5 as if you were casting from Yareli herself. While this is active, Yareli still receives her damage reduction and status immunity as if she was still riding Merulina. However, the status immunity is a little bugged, I think. You can get knocked back by enemies with this augment on, but you will not take self-stagger from explosive weapons you use. And you won't take any damage from heat and slash, even though it shows that you are affected by the status effect, which I think is not intentional, I don't know. So yeah, it is not a bad idea to still run Prime Sure-Footed with this augment if you have Prime Sure-Footed, of course, not everyone does. And if you don't, it does provide some level of knockback immunity from enemies, it's just not 100%. I would imagine that putting normal Prime Sure-Footed or Handspring would actually help with this augment. The Sea Snares, however, from Loyal Merulina actually technically apply its own instance of Sea Snares. While Merulina's Sea Snares will inherit the duration, range, damage, and vulnerability that you have on your own, you can cast your own Sea Snares and Merulina will cast their Sea Snare, and you will double up on the effect, so it stacks, meaning you can get over 500% damage vulnerability with ease. I don't know if this is intended or not, but that is a thing. They stack, which is huge. The downside of Loyal Merulina is the fact that you are susceptible to knockdown, and you will lose the 1.5 seconds of invulnerability if Merulina died, or you would technically dismount Merulina, but obviously that's not the case anymore. You will still gain the 4 seconds of invulnerability though if you recast Merulina, which actually is more than enough time, especially if you have casting speed. So you can still utilize the invulnerability mechanic, it's not the end of the world. Bottom line is, Loyal Merulina allows you to be and move like every other Warframe. You get 2 instances of Sea Snares from Merulina and Yareli, you get semi-status immunity, and you can cast Helminth abilities whereas you wouldn't normally be able to on top of Merulina. At the end of the day, you can decide which way you would like to play, because it all comes down to what you would like. Moving on to Aqua Blades, her third ability, nothing too fancy. Create a trio of orbiting blades that apply a lot of slash procs. This ability can be pretty good at low levels and somewhat okay at base steel path with good buffing from all sources. However, these blades do stagger enemies, which can get annoying but can be countered by using Sea Snares to lift and hold them still. This will allow you to apply many instances of slash procs. This is a cast and forget ability, and also applying viral will help with the damage a lot, and of course if you used raw or something, it would increase the damage. Then we have the augment for Aqua Blades called Surging Blades. This is actually a fun niche augment that can be used and can be pretty good. You can throw a single Aqua Blade out at enemies in a straight line. You can do so by tapping Aqua Blades. Thrown blades will gain 10% damage when any Aqua Blade, whether it's the orbiting ones or the one you threw at the enemy, hits an enemy. It will not cost you anything to throw while riding Merulina, it will cost you energy to keep throwing if you are not. Your thrown blade will have infinite body punch through with a guaranteed slash status effect. This works incredibly well with really high duration on your abilities and grouping enemies together with Riptide or another way. Meat grinding them with the orbiting blades and just stacking up that damage so you start dealing tons of damage with your blades, and then you pair it with viral priming and the vulnerability from your sea snares and so on, and it's a deadly combo. Moving on to her last ability, Riptide. Personally, not my favorite either, but it has its use cases. Cast a water cyclone that will pull enemies in and ragdoll everywhere. This will last 10 seconds at base. The suction range will shrink from 50 meters to 5 meters over 2 seconds. All enemies dragged in will receive cold damage, and when you manually detonate it, it will expire and the cyclone will burst out and splash outward, dealing cold damage that is increased by 50% for each enemy that is still alive within Riptide when it happens. This is affected by ability strength, and while it sounds good, its explosive damage is not. Armor stripped enemies, you are going to have to go all in on trying to buff this explosive damage because it's not that great unless it's like a niche synergy that I haven't really dabbled in, but I'm in no interest of trying to make this a nuking ability personally. But I'm pretty sure in Star Chart it would be pretty good. Riptide does provide a good way to group enemies in for synergies like blast, gas, applying sea snares easier, you name it. Using surging blades in just any instance where you need to group enemies close together. However, it does become a problem when you're using incarnate weapons, since getting headshots can be tricky at times, but that can be sorted out by just picking an enemy up with sea snares and just, charging your incarnate form. That's why sea snares are so amazing. It also allows for easy headshots. Before we go into how to play and build Yareli, could I ask that you could take a second just to hit that like button? It goes a long way. Thank you so much. Let's talk about how to actually play Yareli. Well, if you are a newer player or someone who just wants to play her base kit, it's fairly straightforward. Cast your 1 as a means to deal more damage and crowd control enemies. Cast Merulina once and just stay on there until Merulina dies. Here you get 90% damage reduction, status immunity, and if she dies, you just quickly recast it and you're good to go. Cast your 3 and pretty much forget about it, and then cast your 4 to group enemies and shred them with your secondary. Rinse and repeat. Just remember to utilize the invulnerability from Merulina, cast your sea snares, and you're good to go. She's really not that difficult to play. She's actually very straightforward. Here is a low budget Star Child build for Yareli. If you get your hands on her augment, you can switch out a mod for that. But this now leads me on to the 2 main ways to play Yareli as someone who has progressed a bit in the game and has options. The first being the secondary focused playstyle, which is what Yareli is technically built for. Here, all you do is lean into buffing your secondaries as much as possible. That means making use of Merulina's Guardian, the augment, building for crowd control, a bit of duration on Yareli herself, making use of pistol arcanes like Pistolier, Velocity, or even Precision if you wanted to for whatever reason. You could even make use of Archon Shards to boost your crit via red or topaz shards. With this playstyle from Yareli alone, you are receiving damage vulnerability, 200% crit chance, crowd control, reload speed, fire rate, and more from your arcanes. When it comes to the pistols themselves, I can't stress this enough, literally use whatever you damn want. The usual suspects work incredibly well, of course. The Furus, her signature weapon, the compressor, is just amazing. Dual Toxicist, Ocucore, arguably the best one, Planks, Cycron, Nucore, Acarius. I just can't stress this enough. Use whatever you want, because even other weapon types like primaries and melees are incredibly good, but of course when you're riding Merulina, it forces you to use secondaries. A few secondaries I personally enjoy is the Compressor, Acarius, Epitaph, Sicarus Incarnon, and the Coda Catabolist. The secondary focus build would look like this, as in no Helminth. We will discuss Helminth builds later on. Remember, you can make use of any shards that you want for the build. If you want to go all in on secondaries, you can use red for crit chance or topaz for crit chance as well. This leads me onto how to build her for loyal Merulina. The playstyle that does not make use of her K-drive and focuses on really anything. Here you don't have the restrictions of your K-drive, so you can build for primaries, secondaries, melees, you name it. You also get the benefit of stacking sea snares, and you get to cast Helminth abilities at any given moment. One thing to remember is you do lose the stagger against enemies, but you keep self-stagger. You will also lose the 1.5 seconds of invulnerability when Merulina dies that you would have got, but now it's only 4 seconds, which is still more than enough. In terms of a no Helminth build for Yareli with loyal Merulina, you can use something like this. This setup is just incredibly tanky. Like, you can make use of no prime mods, you can also switch out stretch for fast deflection, to literally make you unkillable, because when you do the 4 seconds of invulnerability, fast deflection will immediately start regaining your shields in that invulnerability period, and you just will keep shield gating. You can also go for streamline, so your Merulina shoots out Snares a little bit faster. You can also switch out adaptation for rolling guard, and if you have prime sure footed, you can make use of that too. Arcane wise, it's fully dependent on you. I went for Aegis since we have 90% damage reduction from Merulina and from adaptation, and potentially fast deflection as well, which makes it semi overkill, but you just don't die with the setup. You'll be proccing Aegis so often, and if you do break your shields, fast deflection kicks in so quickly, so you're good. This setup is really helpful for much higher levels though. You can tone it down and you can change the build to what you like. In terms of aura slots, it actually just depends on what you want. I go for brief respite for extra layers of survivability. You can use whatever. I'll say this again, Yareli is literally one of the tankiest frames in the game if you consider Merulina's invulnerability and you pair it with things like Aegis and fast deflection. It's a bit disgusting. And that's pretty much how to build her as a no Helminth. Because her kit offers so much, you can actually get away with a lot and go for full utility and so on, and she has a lot of flexibility to how you build her. Let's talk about our Helminth setups. As boring as it is, here is my main high level build with Yareli. I make use of Nourish for easy energy sustain and just a bit more comfort, and you can also use fast deflection to help you build up your shields when it breaks, and you can make use of Merulina's invulnerability. But the setup is just a nice build to take to higher level content. It doesn't have to be level cap, it could just be, a little bit of an endurance run, and you can call it a day. Then we have this ridiculous Temple Subsume build that I tested on stream the other day. We make use of Pyrotechnics, we use Archon Vitality, fast Riptide to pull enemies in, and because it bunches them together, it forces all 10 pillars to be on top of each other, stacking those heat procs, which are then doubled by Archon Vitality. And after a few casts, you can get 1,000 plus heat procs with ease. That's if the enemies survive that much damage, which they usually don't. Yeah, pretty broken, not gonna lie, but it is only useful against enemies that do not have overguard and can actually be pulled in by any pull mechanic. It is, however, a very effective trash mob clearer. Then we have a stupid but fun setup which involves the use of Desiccation's Curse to spawn 5 Sand Kavats and using a Panzer Vulpifiler with Duplex Bond to have 9 companions running around dealing damage. And your Snares will apply damage vulnerability to increase their damage even more. Really fun, works very well with a Corrosive Primer too, but it's just more for the memes, nothing too crazy. I have a Surging Blades Augment setup which doesn't have a Helminth currently, but can be used with something like Raw if you wanted to. Firstly, Surging Blades is a nice alternative way to play Yareli. You cast Aqua Blades, group them up so you can scale your Surging Blades damage as high as possible, which allows you to pretty much shred everything as you keep, tapping Surging Blades the whole time. But there's a cool little mechanic with her signature weapon, the Compressor. If you shoot her Compressor on a wall or the ground and quickly cast Surging Blades before it explodes, you will create a bubble with a swirling blade in it that applies slash procs. Now this can be pretty strong. The way we would go about this is we would shoot the Compressor on the floor, throw a blade in it, do this 2 or 3 times, and then we would then cast Riptide right on top of it so all the enemies get pulled in, and you will see it just builds up the augment so quickly and just allows you to shred. And then if you recast those bubbles again, it will have the new damage multiplier, so it creates a giant meat grinder. This is a little bit of an AFK setup. If you don't want to be doing that, then you could just use the augment normally. It still shreds if you build up the damage. If you were to subsume something on this setup, I would recommend Riptide. Now I know what you're thinking, don't we use that to pull them in? Yes, but you can also make use of Nautilus with Cordon to pull them in, or through other ways. We then have a no-brainer evade setup, which is literally so overkill in terms of survivability because you have evade, which makes you invisible, you have Snares that picks enemies up, allowing for easy headshots, and you have a 90% damage reduction and invulnerability from Merulina by recasting. I don't think you can die here, I'll be honest. I guess the slight downside of the setup is that Merulina is wide in the open, not invisible, meaning Merulina will die a bit more, but it also means that Merulina's health will scale so high because it becomes a bullet sponge when you initially cast it. So I would highly recommend this, it's pretty good. And finally, we have a melee focus setup, which you can subsume Wrathful Advance over Aqua Blades. This is on another Yareli, so my polarities aren't correct, but you can switch out Augur Message or something else if you'd like more strength, range, you name it. Just, yeah, it was just a placeholder. You can also make use of purple shards to build that crit damage like crazy. Melee gameplay with Yareli technically isn't ideal, but it can work. The reason for this is because sea snares will lift enemies up and Riptide will lift them up even further. So yeah, sea snares height is fine, but the Riptide height becomes a little bit of a problem at times. Some other subsume suggestions that you could use could be any of the armor stripping ones, Raw, Eclipse, and Omamori, which again is just another overkill way of keeping Yareli alive. And the one that is fairly recent, which I haven't dabbled in, which I should mention, is subsuming Nova's Nullstar for even more survivability and then making use of the new Arcane Hotshot. A very strong synergy that would be really fun and handy to play. But I do not have a max rank Arcane Hotshot yet. That one's expensive as shit. With regards to Archon Shards, I opted for 2 casting speed and 3 duration because she already scales so well with strength. You can go for any one that you want. If you want armor stripping, you can also go for 2 green shards. When it comes to weapons for Yareli, I genuinely anything works. If you're going for secondaries, use what you want. If you're going for loyal Merulina and wanting to use your other weapons, use what you want. This is what makes Yareli so amazing. She's incredibly underrated, incredibly powerful, literally one of the tankiest frames out there, providing good damage, good crowd control. I know many people didn't like Yareli in the past because of her bad launch, as well as the hassle to get the base frame, but I'm hoping with the release of the Prime, people will realize how good she is and she will increase in popularity because, yeah, she's pretty good, especially after all the updates on her and so on. Thank you all for watching. I hope you guys enjoy Yareli Prime. A massive shout out to all of our amazing channel members who help support the channel. Thank you so much. Enjoy Bubble Frame. Bye.